Well, hi, good morning, everybody. We're going to be going live. Well, we're live right now, but we're going to be starting right at about 11, and I'll bring Ray on. Just starting a little bit early so that people can log in to the LinkedIn page and get set up and get ready to watch the interview. Again, thank you for everybody who's said that they're going to attend and want to participate in these ongoing discussions that we're holding under the ARIMA brand. Of course, what we're trying to do is look at how the data landscape is changing in Canada, what kind of platforms are bringing some important developments and evolution in the media measurement space, and also sort of the media evaluation space and business intelligence. We see a lot of people who are hiring for data scientists these days, so it is absolutely an area where marketers are ramping up and really focusing on how their investments are being played out in the market. It's 11 o'clock, so what I'd like to do is introduce Ray Kong, and I'm just going to add him to the stream here. Here's Ray. Good to see you. Thank you so much for participating today. I guess, let's start off. You and I have known each other for, 25, 28 years, something like that. I think that we spent a lot of time talking about marketing, data analytics while we were camping. I think it's one of the few fireside chats that actually involve fire.
And beer.
And beer. Yeah, probably were sort of the liveliness of the discussion depended on how much beer was involved. So, Ray, you've seen a lot of stuff. What are you thinking about these days when it comes to data platforms and marketers and what they need to do?
So I'm going to start, but I love data, and I think data analytics is a really exciting thing, but I come at it as a marketer more than as a data guy. And I'm pretty excited about the tools that are available, but I get a little bit frustrated, I would say, at the lack of use of some of the tools that are available. And particularly now, and why do I say particularly now? There's a fair amount of data and a lot of anecdote that talks about how we as a society, we as a country, we as markets, and there are really thinking about things in very distinct ways from other parts of the market or society. Coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing, we see this coming out of the pandemic where there are vastly different attitudes towards healthcare and our health, vastly different attitudes towards thinking and making decisions and behaviors, and how the pandemic has treated us has really created a lot of differences in that, and not along some traditional, non-traditional lines as well. So, traditionally we might have thought about age segments, we might have thought about other demographically based segments, but I know people of all demographies who think differently about the pandemic than I do. I know people of all ages, all education levels. And so as social cohesion in our market is falling, and as we diverge in our thinking, marketers need to be more focused and more targeted and really understand who the market is, how the market is really targeting, and how to reach them in ways that we didn't really need. We could get away with before.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so targeting. I mean, this is a word that can mean a lot of different things. So, are we talking about business targets? Are we talking about media targets? Are we talking about sales targets? Define it better for me.
Media targets and marketing targets and business targets are all more or less the same thing when it comes to talking about people. And so targets, I'm not talking about, I want to grow by 6%. I'm talking about who are the customers or who are the people in the market that you're trying to reach. For example, I've been working with some small footprint organizations to try to help them understand what outmigration might mean to them. So we've heard a lot in the press about outmigration and people moving away from the cities to other places. I think Nova Scotia just recently I don't think. Nova Scotia just recently, and announced that their population surpassed 1 million.
Mm.
But it's way too blunt to say, oh, you know what? All the people that are moving are, early 30 millennial hipsters with, 1.5 kids and 2 dogs and, a Hyundai whatever car, because that's just too blunt.
Okay.
For example, the people who are moving from Toronto to Strathroy are probably very different than moving from Vancouver to Kelowna, or those who might be moving from Ottawa to somewhere in New Brunswick.
So all this sort of like mosaic of targets, it has to be managed, right? It's not like one and done, sort of like there's a blanket. You gotta figure out more than just one target.
You got to figure out more than just one target. A classic, which is another classic, is immigration. So in 2021, just this last year, I think Canada accepted somewhere like 401,000 new immigrants to the country. And in the past, I know that there's a lot of organizations, because doing one-to-one marketing at scale is not that easy. A lot of organizations will lump new immigrants all into one category. But that's really blunt, because now, for example, the new immigrants that we're accepting are from Nigeria, from Syria, which is not even before. But even if we look at the traditional sources of immigration, which are, let's call them South Asia, from China, from Hong Kong, they're now first, second, and third generations, all with distinct and somewhat unique behaviors in the marketplace. And so to lump everybody together into one group underserves efforts. Now, traditionally, commonality and looking for the commonalities in the experiences was the way to go. But even then, with the diversity and thought that I mentioned before coming out of the pandemic, it really is turning into a much different game now, in my opinion.
Mm. And so the diversity if it's in the audience, it also has to be in your staff, right, to be able to reflect sort of how those groups think, how those groups come together, how they react to brands, how they basically sort of culturally connecting brands between each other. I saw actually a stat this morning. It was like Canada's received more than 400,000 immigrants in the last year. It's a record, and clearly it's something that's going to carry on. At one point, you mentioned that many brands are kind of static with their existing clientele, and that the only growth that they can find is through things like outmigration, changes in population, immigration. So, like, how do you sort of like get involved in the conversation as people come to Canada and start setting up their new lives with new brands and new services? And
well, yeah, that's an interesting question. So let's go back to your other question about, is it a business target or is it a, media target? And, I'll start with the business imperative. If we think about a bank or a credit union or, other organizations let's look at credit unions and banks, for example. The Canadian marketplace is saturated with, we are a overbanked population. I don't remember the exact number, but we on average have 2.3 relationships or with different financial institutions. And I think something like 98% of the population has at least one banking account. So for a bank or a credit union or any other kind of financial institution to grow share, you either have to steal share from your competitor, or you have to find new share in a saturated market. The sources of new share traditionally are young people who've never had a banking account, even though, many of us have had, deal with the same financial institution that we dealt with when we were 7, and our, parents took us to the bank and opened the account with us, and it's our parents' financial institution, or it's new immigrants. And since new immigration is, going to be the growth engine for our population for the foreseeable future, lots of financial organizations are looking to the new immigrant population as the new source of growth.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But they but they, again, they lump them all into one, into where, somebody coming from Syria is the same as from Afghanistan, is the same from somebody coming from Nigeria versus India.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way to do it is to really think about what a new Canadian goes through when they come to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Put yourself in their shoes. I'm moving to a new country. The language is unfamiliar. I will seek out populations which are like me, because that is how I will get information. Those are the populations I trust. It'll be those will be people that I speak the same language as me. So there are patterns of settlement by the different immigrant groups. But I want to establish, most immigrants want to establish themselves in their new communities. And so how can I establish myself in a new community? What are the ways that organizations can help new immigrants settle in the new community? Many of them will come and start new businesses, or come in on visas which require them to start or run a business. A total natural for banking. How can I help them with that? What are the products and services and community linkages that I can help them create to do that? And so putting yourself in the immigrant's shoes and the immigrant journey, and understanding where they are going, there's a lot of tools, geolocation, GIS-based tools to help understand where immigrants are settling from different places. And really focusing on how you can help them in the marketplace is a really important thing for marketers to know.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me. We did a campaign like this is decades ago, but we were looking at where it was a government campaign, and we were looking at reaching out to new immigrants, and one of the things that we uncovered through one of our media suppliers was the ability to provide cricket scores. And people are coming to the country, but they still maintain some very important ties back to their home team. And so the ability to understand, like as we were talking about earlier, was the importance of rugby, or the importance of cricket and football, not soccer, football, right? And the ability to say, okay, like there's some very specific behaviors that offer insights into how we can establish these dialogues is quite important to people.
I recently met and had beers with, just before Christmas, or just in November, with somebody who was introduced to me, who just came to Canada from South Africa. And there's a fairly large South African new immigrant population here in Canada. And we were sitting in a pub over lunch, and he was saying, "Where can I watch the rugby game tomorrow?" And I didn't know, and nobody knew. But if some entrepreneurial or smart person could find a community hub and show the rugby game live, then that would be a good opportunity, in my opinion. For sure. One of the misconceptions about targeting, though, is that targeting is exclusionary, and I don't think targeting is exclusionary. Some people say that if I target young people, do I alienate old people? If I target people with glasses, do I alienate people without glasses? But I don't think that's true. There's a design principle that says if you design for the extremes, then the whole will benefit. And a really simple example might be, designing for accessibility. And so if you're designing your website to be more accessible, the principles in general will be use high contrast fonts, have larger print, and then I'll pause and I'll say, well, yeah, but our aging population could also benefit from high contrast fonts. And actually, when we were at the fireside having beers and talking, I don't think either of us were wearing glasses, Chris. But as I get older and my eyesight gets older, larger font isn't such a bad thing. And so you've designed something for a specific target market, but there's multiple benefits to other markets as well. And so I think the other hurdle that people need to get over is to not think about targeting as exclusionary, but just think about it as ways to identify either better design, better approaches, and open up yourself to more and diverse markets.
So, but I mean, is the brand the unifier across these disparate groups? I mean, you're talking about sort of the segmentation, people becoming sort of more polarized in society. Does that mean that the brand should react and become different to each group, or should the brand sort of remain as a sort of unified sort of position?
The brand can remain as a unified position because, brands, as much as anything, need to be true to what the organization is and provides and can provide.
Mm-hmm.
But when I talk about targeting, I think it really is more tactical. It's about, where do people live? If I'm a geographically based business, or it's what products, how to position the products that are offered for the specific customer journey. It might be media targets. Some groups, I mean, the easy one is some groups will be more digitally media, others more old fashioned. Some are more reliant. It's harder for us to think, when we're in cities, it's harder for us to think about those that are in rural towns. But, is radio, how important is radio versus digital in places where maybe bandwidth isn't such a great thing?
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, it's more, to me, the tools that are available now, the local targeting tools, are more about tactics and reach, not necessarily reach in a media sense, but geographic reach and geographic targeting than they are about brand building, although there is a dimension of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of the great things about the local targeting tools that are available now is that many of them are being built to be faster than the traditional ones. One of the things that frustrates many of us, all of us, and I know census comes out every 5 years. So right now, many targeting tools are using 2016 census data. Now, thankfully, 2022 is a census data release year, and so over the course of this year, I think there's 4 or 5 releases of the latest census data, which will refresh all of that. But even if we went back to November last year, you were trying to help, or I was trying to help organizations with their targeting, you're using 2016 census data, and we all know how different the world is now than it was in 2016. And so the tools that are being built now, like Arima, are just fantastic because they're building in innovative and current data sets, like U-Haul rentals to understand out-migration patterns, or weather patterns to understand where severe weather events are likely to happen, even though you don't want to try to predict the weather with that.
Mm-hmm.
For insurance companies, that's important to understand patterns of location risk.
Mm-hmm.
So the tools that are being built now are really, really exciting, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like the last 20 years of sort of digital media, of ad server data and analytic data coming from the site and stuff. It's all generally real time or near real time, and it's set an expectation with marketers that it's like, this is what I want to see, like what's happening this week or today. Even we are discussing that earlier with a marketer, is like they want to see daily data. They get sales data at that rate. So this sort of disparity of some data comes every 5 years, some data comes every year, some data comes every month, and other data is coming at us in real time, has to be sort of, managed in a way that people can actually see it and deal with it and use it. Of course, I mean, the actionability is super important.
Well, and some data is not appropriate to even to use on a fast cadence. I mean, you don't establish trends over days on some things, but other things it is. And so some of the observational databases or the behavioral databases that are built into these tools, based on, we'll call them cell phone movement patterns, for example, are pretty interesting for retailers or for other, location-based organizations to understand traffic patterns, or understand where people are coming to and going from when they're not going to restaurants, or they're not going to the gym, or those kinds of things.
And so do you find that this sort of granular, speedy data, I mean, it's also a high volume of it as well, is it making its way up to the strategy level to say, okay, like, sure, this is really granular data, but are you finding the insights, within that granular data that's actually going to drive business for the marketers that you work with?
I think it can, and it does, but it comes back to 101 hygiene. You
Okay.
know, the saying is, if you don't know where you're going, any road's going to take you there. And so if you don't know what data you need and what data you're going to use and why it's relevant to your target market
Yeah.
or your marketing strategy, then you'll just get a stream of data, and it will be a stream of data. And it may or may not be useful to you, but you won't know because you don't have a map to use it, or you don't have a purpose for using it. And so again, for me, the hygiene is to define the target market crisply and define the objectives against the target market. And I just get flabbergasted with the number of organizations that I even today come into touch with, into contact with, that define their target market. Some, Canadians 18 to 64, male or female, whoever, breathing and with a heartbeat.
Yeah.
That doesn't help.
How does creative fit into this? I mean, creative can be absolutely magic when it works, but are we becoming too data oriented? Like, are we losing the magic of creative in this sort of view?
I think that creative's a hard one because, in the utopian Minority Report, utopian world, everybody would get a slightly different version of the creative depending on who they are on a one-to-one basis, but that is just proven to be unfeasible. Does it stifle creativity? I think that's an interesting and very loaded question. I think that you can be very creative, but again, I'll sound like a broken record. You have to understand your target market. And if you don't have a target market, then your creative will be vanilla.
Yep.
And will not be responsive.
Right. So back to what you were talking about, the accessibility stuff, you really have to focus on how it works.
On how it works, who you're talking to, why you're talking to them. And again, not think of it as an exclusive thing or an exclusionary thing, but think of it as a design tool to help you market more, appeal to a different element of the market, perhaps.
Okay. So looking forward, like, what's coming up this year for you that you're sort of like pretty excited about, that you're saying, okay, this is where you want to focus your attention?
My daughter laughs at me because I'm excited about the loading of the latest census data to many of these tools, and to really looking at how things have changed since 2016, because there's a lot. And I'm looking forward to understanding how the different mindsets in our population can be more crisply defined as we hopefully, touch wood, exit the pandemic, and try to understand how the different groups that are thinking about many different things can be identified, and can be communicated to, I guess.
And so this exiting the pandemic, it seems like we've been exiting the pandemic for quite a long time. Do you think that there's actually been a sort of like a sea change happen during the pandemic of infrastructure, or that is changing the role of the marketer?
I'm not sure about infrastructure. I think that,
or viewpoint.
Well, I think that, many of the forces, I mean, it's easy to say, many of the forces that were started before the pandemic have been accelerated through the pandemic. So, for example, digital behaviors have accelerated through all demographics. People who have never ordered online groceries before have now ordered online groceries. But for marketers, what that means is that the comparator set has widened. When we talk to consumers, old and young, people used to say, well, I compare banks to banks. I compare insurance companies to insurance companies, telcos to telcos, but no longer, right? I compare the service I get from a bank to the service I get from Amazon. Why can't my bank be more like Apple? Why can't my bank think more like Amazon? And so from that perspective, I think that organizations have to think very differently and think beyond their own kind of industry or sector when it comes to not only service delivery, but also marketing and communications and the style of it.
Wow, that's a huge challenge.
It is a huge challenge, but it keeps us marketers employed, I guess, right? Because it's a shifting dynamic all the time.
All right. Well, I look forward to this. Listen, we're going to wrap up. Thank you. Like, it's a great discussion. Look forward to more. And again, thank you for working with us over the last year and doing some interesting sort of challenges that you brought to us. And of course, when the census comes out, we should have a big round table and pour over the numbers and ask ourselves what's changed in Canada and what do we take from there.
Yeah, thanks for asking me. Appreciate being on.
Yeah, good to see you again, Ray.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully there was something useful there for you.
Yeah, true. So we're going to be continuing to do these kinds of things on a periodic basis. I'm not setting up a schedule, but we have a lineup of speakers that have indicated some interest. And so we'll carry on and we'll let you know when the next live discussion with LinkedIn is going to happen through Arima. And we'll see you then. Okay, cheers, everybody. Thank you.